The stars were quiet that night. Admiral Doyon Park stood at the observation deck of his ship, the Horizon, watching the endless darkness of space. His vessel was old and small, nothing compared to the massive warships of the elder races. But it was his, and he was proud of it. Humanity had joined the Galactic Council only 60 years ago. In a galaxy where some species had existed for millions of years, humans were like newborn babies. The other races tolerated them, smiled at them, and quietly ignored them. Earth had one small fleet and a few colonies. Nothing impressive. Nothing worth noticing. Doyon had accepted this reality long ago. He did his job, patrolled the outer rim, and kept his crew safe. That was enough. But tonight, everything would change. Lieutenant Nari Kim rushed onto the observation deck. She was young, barely 25, with sharp eyes and a quick mind. She was also the best communications officer Doyon had ever worked with. "Admiral," she said, breathing hard, "we received something. A signal. You need to hear this." Doyon followed her to the communications room. The crew stepped aside as he entered. On the main screen, a waveform danced and flickered. The signal was weak, broken, desperate. Nari pressed a button, and a voice filled the room. It was not human. The voice was like wind passing through crystal, beautiful and sad at the same time. But the words were translated automatically, and what they said made Doyon's blood run cold. "Please, ... anyone. They are taking our children. They are harvesting us. We cannot fight. We cannot run. Please. Help us, ... The message repeated over and over, each time more broken than before. "Where is this coming from?" Doyon asked. "The Valorian homeworld," Nari answered quietly. Doyon felt his heart stop for a moment. The Valorians were one of the oldest and most peaceful species in the galaxy. They were beings made of living crystal, beautiful and gentle. In their 12,000 years of recorded history, they had never asked anyone for help. They had never needed to, until now. "Who is attacking them?" Doyon demanded. Nari's face was pale. "The Krath Dominion." The room fell silent. Everyone knew about the Krath. They were hunters, conquerors, destroyers. They had crushed civilizations older than human recorded history. Their empires stretched across half the galaxy, built on fear and death. No one challenged the Krath. No one survived challenging the Krath. "Send this to Earth immediately," Doyon ordered, "and contact the Galactic Council. They need to know." Nari nodded and began working. Doyon walked back to the observation deck and stared at the stars. Somewhere out there, millions of innocent beings were dying, and he could do nothing but watch. 3 days later, the Galactic Council held an emergency meeting. Representatives from hundreds of species gathered in the Great Hall on the neutral world of Tyrannus. The hall was enormous, built to hold beings of every shape and size. Some floated in water tanks. Others breathed gases that would kill a human in seconds. But they all came together to discuss the crisis. Doyon was allowed to attend as an observer. He stood in the back watching the proceedings with growing anger. The Tyranni speaker, tall being with 4 arms and silver skin, addressed the council. "We have confirmed the reports. The Krath Dominion has invaded Valorian space. They are harvesting the Valorian population." A murmur passed through the hall. Harvesting. It was a clean word for something horrible. The Krath were extracting the crystalline cores of Valorian children. These cores could power ships and weapons for centuries. To the Krath, Valorian children were nothing but batteries. "We must respond," the Tyranni speaker continued. "I open the floor for proposals." One by one, the elder races spoke. And one by one, Doyon felt his hope die. "We propose a formal statement of concern," said the representative from the Ashuri Collective. "We suggest economic pressure through trade. Restrictions offered another species, perhaps a monitoring mission too. Observe the situation," suggested a third. Statements. Pressure. Monitoring. Words. 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 But no action. No help. No rescue. Doyon clenched his fists so hard, his nails drew blood from his palms. Finally, a young human diplomat stood up. He was new to the council, nervous but determined. With respect, he said, millions are dying right now. Children are being murdered. We cannot simply watch and write reports. We must act. The council fell silent. Then, slowly, the Tirani speaker responded. The human representative speaks with passion, but passion does not win wars. The Krath cannot be defeated. Any military action would only add more death to an already tragic situation. We must be realistic. Realistic, the human diplomat said, his voice shaking. You are telling us to let them die because fighting is too hard? We are telling you, another elder species interrupted coldly, to know your place. Humanity is young. You do not understand how the galaxy works. The Krath are unstoppable. This is simply how things are. Learn to accept it. The human diplomat sat down, defeated. Doyon could not stay silent anymore. He stepped forward, ignoring protocol, ignoring the shocked looks from the other observers. You are all cowards, he said. His voice was calm but carried through the entire hall. 12,000 years, the Valorians have been your friends, your partners, your neighbors. And now, when they cry out for help, you offer them words. You offer them nothing. Guards moved toward him, but he kept speaking. They sent a signal, a desperate plea, and every single one of you heard it, and every single one of you chose to look away. He was dragged from the hall, but he did not care. He had said what needed to be said. That night, alone in his quarters, Doyon made a decision. He opened a secure channel to Earth, directly to the office of President Su Jin-yoon. Admiral Park, her voice came through, tired but alert. I watched the council meeting. I saw what you did. I apologize for the breach in protocol, Madame President, Doyon said. Do not apologize, Sujin replied. You said what all of us were thinking. There was a pause. Then she asked the question that would change everything. Admiral, if I gave you the order, could humanity make a difference out there? Doyon thought of his small ship, his tired crew, his people's tiny fleet. He thought of the Krath and their endless armies. He thought of everything they would lose. Then he thought of the voice in the signal, the crystal voice begging for help, the children being harvested. Yes, he said. We could. Sujin was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke again, her voice was steel. And come home, Admiral. We have a war to plan. The signal cut off. Doyon sat in the darkness of his room, feeling the weight of what was coming. The galaxy thought humanity was weak. The galaxy thought humans would stay quiet and accept their place. The galaxy was about to learn. How wrong it was, President Su Jin-yoon had not slept in 3 days. The reports kept coming, each one worse than the last. Satellite images showed Krath ships hovering over Valorian cities like vultures. Heat signatures revealed mass graves. Communication intercepts captured the screams of dying families. She sat in the war room, surrounded by the most powerful people on Earth. Defense Minister Jae-won Lee stood at her right, his face hard and unreadable. Commander Hannah Choi of Special Operations sat across the table, her eyes scanning battle projections on her tablet. Fleet Admiral Temin Kong, the highest-ranking military officer in human space, leaned against the wall with his arms crossed. Give me the honest truth, Sujin said. Can we win? Jawan shook his head slowly. Not in a traditional war. The Krath have over 10,000 warships. We have 800. Their technology is centuries ahead of ours. Their soldiers have been fighting wars since before humans discovered fire. So we lose, Sujin said flatly. If we fight the way they expect us to fight, yes, Jawan replied. We lose badly. Silence filled the room. Then Hannah Choi spoke up. Madam President, may I share something? Sujin nodded. Hannah stood and walked to the main display screen. She pulled up an image of an ancient Earth predator, a wolf, chasing a deer across a snowy landscape. The galaxy thinks we are weak because we are young, Hannah said. But they do not understand what we are. Humans did not evolve with claws or fangs or armor. We evolved with something far more dangerous. We evolved with endurance. She changed the image to show early humans hunting on the African plains. Our ancestors did not run faster than their prey. They simply ran longer. They chased animals for hours, for days, until their prey collapsed from exhaustion. We are persistence predators. We do not stop. We do not give up. We just keep coming. Admiral Temin pushed off the wall and stepped forward. The Krath fight wars of domination. Fast, overwhelming, brutal. They crush their enemies before resistance can form. But if the enemy refuses to be crushed, if the enemy keeps fighting no matter what, the Krath have no answer for that. We cannot match their strength, Hannah continued, but we can outlast them. We can fight in ways they do not expect. We can turn every victory they win into a cost they cannot afford. Sujin listened carefully. What exactly are you proposing? Guerrilla warfare on a galactic scale, Hannah answered. Hit and run. Strike and vanish. Make them bleed for every system, every planet, every inch of space. And never, ever stop. Jaewon added. We also have something the Krath have never faced before, motivation. Every species they have conquered was fighting for territory or resources. We will be fighting because it is the right thing to do. That kind of fight changes soldiers. Sujin looked around the room. These were serious people, experienced people, and they were telling her that humanity had a chance. A small chance. A desperate chance. But a chance. If we do this, she said slowly, many will die. Our people. Our soldiers. Our children. Yes, Temin replied simply. But if we do nothing, the Valorians die anyway. And then the next species, and the next. The Krath will never stop. Someone has to stand up to them. Someone has to be first. Sujin closed her eyes. She thought of her own children, safe at home, sleeping peacefully. She thought of the Valorian children who would never sleep again. She thought of every mother and father across the galaxy who had watched their families be taken. When she opened her eyes, her decision was made. Prepare the fleet, she said, and prepare a message for the galaxy. We are going to war. The next day, every communication channel in the galaxy carried the same broadcast. President Sujin Yoon stood at a simple podium, the flag of United Earth behind her. She wore no armor, no uniform, just the simple clothes of a civilian leader. Her voice was calm but carried a weight that made entire civilizations stop and listen. To the beings of the galaxy she began, 3 days ago we received a message, a cry for help from the Valorian people. They told us their children were being taken. They told us they were being harvested like animals. They begged for someone, anyone, to save them. She paused, letting the words sink in. We brought this message to the Galactic Council. We asked for action. We were told to accept reality. We were told the Krath cannot be stopped. We were told to know our place. Her eyes hardened. We reject that reality. We reject our place. Across the galaxy, billions of beings watched in shock. To the Krath Dominion, Sujin continued, her voice rising, you have attacked the innocent. You have murdered children. You have committed crimes that cannot be forgiven and will not be forgotten. And now you have made a mistake that no species in this galaxy has ever made. Shh. She leaned forward slightly, her words burning with cold fire. You have given humanity a reason to fight. We do not declare concern. We do not monitor. We do not write reports or impose sanctions. We declare war. Total and absolute war. We will come for you with every ship, every soldier, every weapon we have. We will fight you in space and on the ground. We will fight you in the light and in the dark. We will fight you until you release every prisoner, return every child, and answer for every crime. You think we are young? You think we are weak? You are wrong. We have been fighting wars since the beginning of our existence. We have fought each other for thousands of years. We know war better than you can imagine. And now, for the first time in human history, we are united against a common enemy. This is not a threat. This is a promise. We are coming. The transmission ended. For a long moment, the galaxy was silent. Then the reactions began. The Terrani Federation sent urgent diplomatic messages begging humanity to reconsider. They spoke of treaties, negotiations, peaceful solutions. They were ignored. The Ashuri Collective began evacuating their colonies near human space. They were certain they were watching a species commit suicide. They wanted no part of it. Other species simply watched in disbelief. Some laughed. Some wept. Some prayed to gods they had forgotten. And on the bridge of his massive flagship, High Commander Vorak of the Krath Dominion received the message. He played it 3 times, studying the small human woman who dared to threaten his empire. Then he laughed. It was a deep, rumbling sound, like mountains crashing together. "These creatures are insane," he said to his officers. "Send 1 destroyer to their nearest colony. Burn it to ash. That will teach them their place." His officers obeyed immediately. A single Krath destroyer, armed with weapons that could crack planets, turned toward human space. It was the first move in what Vorak expected to be a very short war. He could not have been more wrong. Back on Earth, Admiral Doyan watched the Krath ship approaching on his tactical display. Around him, the full strength of humanity's fleet was gathering. Cargo ships were being stripped and armed. Civilians were volunteering by the millions. Scientists were working without sleep. Nari Kim appeared at his side. "Admiral, the Krath destroyer will reach our colony in 6 hours. Doyan nodded slowly. "Then we meet them in 5. He looked out at the stars, at the tiny blue planet behind him, at the fleet of imperfect ships crewed by imperfect humans. "Let them come," he said quietly. "Let them learn what we are." The first battle of the Human-Krath War was about to begin, and nothing in the galaxy would ever be the same. The Krath destroyer was called the Devourer. It had burned 17 worlds in its long service to the Dominion. Its captain, a massive Krath warrior named Vorath, considered this mission beneath him. Destroying a human colony was like stepping on an insect. Barely worth the effort. His ship dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the human colony system. Sensors showed a small planet, green and blue, with 3 million humans living on its surface. "Easy prey, sir," one of his officers called out. "We are detecting ships approaching." Vorath snorted. "How many?" 47, sir." 47 ships against 1 Krath destroyer. Vorath almost felt sorry for them. His single ship could destroy 100 vessels of their class. These humans truly did not understand what they were facing. "Let them come close," Vorath ordered. "I want them to see death before they meet it." The human fleet approached in a scattered formation. Vorath watched with amusement. Their ships were small, ugly, and clearly outdated. Some looked like cargo vessels with weapons strapped to their hulls. This was not a military force. This was desperation. Admiral Dojan stood on the bridge of the horizon, watching the Krath destroyer grow larger on his screen. His heart was pounding, but his hands were steady. Behind him, Narikim worked her console with focused precision. "All ships report ready," she announced. Doyan replied. "Remember the plan. We are not here to win. We are here to survive." The Krath destroyer opened fire. Beams of terrible energy cut through space, vaporizing 3 human ships instantly. The explosions were silent in the vacuum, but Doyan felt each one like a punch to his chest. Those were his people dying. "Scatter," he commanded. "Execute pattern 7. The human ships broke apart in all directions, moving in chaotic, unpredictable paths. The Krath weapons tracked them, but the erratic movements made targeting difficult. More ships died, but fewer than expected. Vorath frowned. This was strange. Most species froze when faced with Krath firepower. They tried to retreat or surrender. These humans were doing neither. They were spreading out, circling, dancing around his weapons like insects around a flame. "Increase fire rate," he ordered. "Destroy them all." But the humans kept coming. Small groups of ships would dart in, fire their weapons at the destroyer's shields, and pull back before the return fire could catch them. Their weapons were weak, almost laughable. But they kept firing. again and again and again. "Sir," an officer reported with confusion in his voice, "their attacks are having no significant effect on our shields." "Why do they continue?" Vorith did not answer. He was watching the battle with growing unease. Something was wrong. These humans knew they could not hurt him. So why did they keep fighting? The answer came 30 minutes later. "Sir, shield generators are overheating. We need to reduce power to allow cooling." Vorath stared at his officer. "What, the constant attacks, sir? Each one is weak, but there have been thousands. Our systems were not designed for this kind of sustained combat. We need to withdraw and cool the generators, or we risk cascade failure." Vorath looked at the tactical display. 23 human ships remained, still circling, still firing their pathetic weapons. They had lost half their fleet, but they had not stopped. Not for a second. For the first time in his long career, Vorath felt something he had never experienced before. Doubt. "Full retreat," he ordered quietly. "We will return with more ships." The Krath destroyer turned and fled. On every human ship, exhausted crews watched it go. No one cheered. Too many friends had died. But they had done something no one thought possible. They had made the Krath run. News of the battle spread across the galaxy like wildfire. A single Krath destroyer, forced to retreat by a fleet of outdated human ships. The elder races did not know what to make of it. Some said it was a trick. Some said the reports were exaggerated. Some said it did not matter, that the Krath would simply send more ships. They were right about the last part, High Commander. Vorak received Vorak's report with cold fury. One destroyer should have been enough to humble these humans. Instead, it had returned in shame, its shields damaged by insects. "Send 50 destroyers," Vorak commanded. "And 1 dreadnought. I want their homeworld burned." But humanity was not waiting to be attacked. While the Krath gathered their fleet, Earth was transforming. Fleet Admiral Timan Kong had mobilized every resource humanity possessed. Factories that once made cars now built weapons. Universities that once studied stars now designed battle strategy. Ease. Children too young to fight collected metal for ship armor. Old soldiers who thought their fighting days were over put on uniforms once more. Dr. Minji. Beak led a team of scientists who had not slept in a week. They had captured fragments of Krath shield technology from the first battle, and they were working to crack its secrets. "The shields operate on a rotating frequency," Minji explained to Commander Hannah Choi, her eyes red with exhaustion. "If we can predict the rotation, we can time our weapons to hit at the exact moment of vulnerability." "How long until you have a working solution?" Hannah asked. "Days, maybe hours, if we push harder, push harder." Across human space, similar scenes played out. Engineers found ways to make engines faster. Tacticians developed new attack patterns. Doctors prepared for casualties that would make previous wars look like minor incidents, and volunteers kept coming. Not just soldiers, teachers, farmers, artists, scientists, people who had never held a weapon in their lives lined up to do whatever was needed. When asked why, most gave the same answer: someone has to help them, because no one else will. The galaxy watched in disbelief. They had never seen anything like this. When the Krath threatened a species, that species negotiated or fled or died. They did not transform their entire civilization into a weapon. They did not send untrained civilians to die for strangers they had never met. On the Ashuri homeworld, an elder philosopher watched the human mobilization on his screen. He had lived for 800 years and seen dozens of species rise and fall. He had thought he understood the patterns of the universe. Now, he was not so sure. "What are they?" his student asked, standing beside him. The philosopher thought for a long moment before answering. "They are something new, or perhaps something very old. Something we forgot existed." "What is that?" "Hope," the philosopher said quietly. "Terrifying, impossible, beautiful hope." The Krath fleet arrived in human space 2 weeks later. 50 destroyers and 1 dreadnought, enough firepower to crack a planet. They expected to find a species ready to surrender. Instead, they found empty space. The human colonies had been evacuated. Every civilian had been moved to hidden locations. Only the military remained, and even they were not where the Krath expected. The first attack came from behind. A small group of human ships, hidden in an asteroid field, launched missiles at the Krath supply vessels. By the time the destroyers turned to respond, the attackers were gone. The second attack came from below, relative to the galactic plane. Another group of ships, targeting communication relays. The Krath fleet lost coordination for precious minutes. The third attack came from everywhere at once. Dozens of human ships appearing from behind moons and inside radiation clouds in places no sane species would hide, all striking at different targets before vanishing again. Colonel Sun Wuhan led the most daring raid. His team flew directly through the exhaust trail of the Krath dreadnought, using its own heat signature to mask their approach. They attached explosive charges to the ship's sensor arrays and escaped before anyone knew. They were there. When the charges detonated, the dreadnought went blind. High Commander Vorak watched the reports with growing rage. His forces were being bitten to death by flies. Every time they turned to crush one group of humans, 3 more appeared elsewhere. They could not rest. They could not resupply. They could not predict where the next attack would come. "What are these creatures?" he demanded. No one could answer him. On the bridge of the horizon, Admiral Doyen allowed himself a small smile. They were still losing ships. They were still dying. But they were making the Krath bleed, and that was something no one had ever done before. Admiral Nari said, looking up from her console, "I have intercepted Krath communications. They are requesting reinforcements," Godoyan replied. "Let them call for help. Let the whole galaxy see that the mighty Krath cannot crush a species of infants." He turned to face his crew, exhausted and battered but still standing. "We have a long way to go. But today, we proved something important. We can fight them. We can hurt them. And we will never, ever stop." The crew nodded, their faces grim but determined. They knew the worst was yet to come. But they also knew something the Krath were just beginning to understand. Humans did not know how to give up. The war raged for 3 months before. Humanity made its first major move. During those months, the Krath learned to fear the dark spaces between stars. Human ships appeared from nowhere, struck hard, and vanished before retaliation was possible. Supply lines were cut. Communication networks were disrupted. Krath soldiers began to whisper about ghosts in the void, but Admiral Dojan knew that hit-and-run tactics could only accomplish so much. To truly defeat the Krath, to save the Valorians, humanity needed to take the offensive. They needed to attack the enemy where they least expected it. They needed to liberate the Valorian homeworld. The planet was called Valoria Prime. It was a place of heartbreaking beauty. Crystal mountains rose toward purple skies. Rivers of liquid light flowed through valleys that sang when the wind passed through. For 12,000 years, the Valorians had lived there in peace and harmony. Now, it was a prison camp. Krath soldiers patrolled the streets. Harvesting facilities dotted the landscape. Dark factories where Valorian children were taken and never returned. The survivors lived in fear, hiding their young. Praying for salvation that seemed impossible, Fleet Admiral Timan Kong gathered the human commanders for the planning session. The holographic display showed Valoria Prime surrounded by 100 Krath warships. The orbital defenses alone could destroy any approaching fleet. "Direct assault is suicide," Captain Yoon Ji-song said flatly. She was the youngest fleet commander in human history, promoted after her previous captain died in a Krath ambush. Her voice was calm, but her eyes burned with determination. "Agreed," said Colonel Sun Wuhan. "We need to draw their fleet away. Create an opening." Commander Hannah Choi studied the tactical display. "What if we give them something they cannot ignore? Something that forces them to respond?" "What did you have in mind?" Taman asked. Hannah smiled grimly. "We attacked the Krath homeworld." The room fell silent. The Krath homeworld was the most heavily defended place in the galaxy. Attacking it would be insane. "We do not need to win," Hannah continued. "We just need to threaten. Strike their capital, their pride, and High Commander Vorak will have no choice but to respond. He will pull ships from every corner of his empire, including Valoria Prime. Taman nodded slowly. It is risky. We will lose many ships in the diversion. We will lose many more if we do nothing, Hannah replied. The plan was approved. 3 weeks later, Captain Yunji Song led a fleet of 200 ships toward the Krath homeworld. They knew most of them would not come back. They went anyway. The attack on the Krath homeworld was not meant to succeed. It was meant to terrify. Human ships appeared in orbit around the enemy capital and began firing at everything they could reach. They targeted government buildings, military installations, and broadcasting towers. They made sure every Krath citizen could see the explosions in their sky. High Commander Vorak was leading the occupation of Valoria Prime when he received the news. His face twisted with rage so intense that his officers stepped back in fear. They dare attack our home? He roared, they dare. Sir, one officer said carefully, it is likely a diversion. If we pull forces from Valoria Prime, I do not care. Vorak shouted, no enemy has ever touched our homeworld. Every ship in range will respond immediately. We will crush these insects and scatter their ashes across the galaxy. 70 ships left Valoria Prime's orbit, racing toward the Krath homeworld. It was exactly what the humans had planned. Admiral Doyen watched the Krath fleet depart from his hidden position behind Valoria Prime's moon. The enemy still had 30 ships in orbit, but it was far fewer than before. Lieutenant Kim, he said quietly, send the signal. Liberation begins now. The Battle of Valoria Prime lasted 19 days. It was the largest military operation in human history, and it would become the most legendary. The human fleet attacked in waves, using every trick they had learned in months of guerrilla warfare. They flew through asteroid fields to avoid detection. They used Valorian sun's radiation to mask their heat signatures. They attacked from angles that Krath tactical doctrine considered impossible. Colonel Sun Wuhan led ground forces to the surface. They landed not in the capital but in the countryside, near the harvesting facilities. Their mission was simple: free the prisoners, destroy the factories, give the Valorians hope. The fighting on the ground was brutal. Krath soldiers were larger, stronger, and better equipped. But the humans had something the Krath did not understand. They had come to save lives, and they refused to use weapons that might harm the Valorian prisoners. This made combat harder, more dangerous, more costly. Human soldiers died protecting aliens they had never met. Private Jimino was 19 years old when he threw himself on a Krath, explosive to shield a group of Valorian children. His last words were asking if the children were safe. They were. Sergeant Una Park led her squad into a harvesting facility and held the E in trance for 6 hours against continuous assault, allowing rescue teams to evacuate 300 prisoners. She was found the next morning still at her post, her weapon empty and her body broken. But the prisoners had escaped. Stories like these spread through the galaxy. Other species could not understand it. Why would humans die for strangers? Why would they sacrifice everything for beings they had no obligation to protect? The Valorians understood. They'd been alone for so long, abandoned by a galaxy that claimed to be civilized. And now, these strange, fierce, impossible creatures had come from across the stars to fight and die for them. In orbit, the battle reached its climax. Admiral Doyan faced the Krath fleet commander in a desperate final engagement. Both sides had taken terrible losses. Both were exhausted beyond measure. Lieutenant Nari Kim worked her console with blistered fingers, coordinating dozens of ships, keeping the human fleet together through sheer force of will. When her console exploded from a power surge, she switched to backup systems without missing a beat. Admiral, she reported voice hoarse, the Krath flagship is vulnerable. Their shields are failing. Doyan looked at the tactical display. The path to the enemy flagship was filled with weapons fire. Any ship that made the approach would be torn apart. I will go, he said. Sir, that is a direct order, Lieutenant. Keep the fleet together. Finish what we started. Doyan took the Horizon into the firestorm. His ship was hit again and again, systems failing one by one. But he kept going, flying through explosions and debris. Refusing to turn back, he reached the Krath flagship and launched every weapon he had left. The missiles found their targets, ripping through weakened shields and into the ship's core systems. The Krath commander's voice came through on an open channel. "Human, you are insane. You cannot destroy us this way. We do not surrender." Doyon smiled, even as his ship fell apart around him. "Neither do we." The Horizon rammed the Krath flagship at full speed. The collision sent both ships spiraling into Valoria Prime's atmosphere, burning like fallen stars. The Krath fleet broke. Without their flagship, without their commander, they fell into chaos. The human ships pressed their advantage, driving the enemy back, destroying or capturing every Krath vessel in the system. On the surface, Valorian survivors emerged from hiding to find human soldiers standing guard over their cities. The soldiers were wounded, exhausted, and far from home. But they were there. An elderly Valorian, her crystal body scarred from torture, approached Colonel Sun Wuhan. She could not speak human language, but she did not need to. She simply touched her hand to his chest, over his heart, and bowed. Sun Wu bowed back. Around them, other Valorians and humans did the same. The Battle of Valoria Prime was over. The liberation had succeeded. But the war was not finished. High Commander Vorak was still alive. And he was coming with the full fury of the Krath Dominion. The real fight was just beginning. The news of Valoria Prime's liberation spread across the galaxy like a rising sun. For the first time in centuries, the Krath Dominion had lost a world they had conquered. And they had lost it to a species that had existed in the galactic community for barely a single human lifetime. High Commander. Vorak gathered the largest fleet in Krath history. 500 warships, including 12 planet-killing dreadnoughts aimed at a single target. He would crush the humans. He would burn their worlds. He would make their entire species a lesson for any who dared challenge the Dominion. But something unexpected was happening across the galaxy. On dozens of conquered worlds, species who had submitted to the Krath for generations began to whisper. They shared recordings of the human declaration of war. They passed along stories of soldiers dying to protect alien children. They heard about a young species that had looked at impossible odds and chosen to fight anyway. And they began to ask themselves a dangerous question. If the humans can resist, why can't we? The first revolt happened on a mining world called Threshold, where the insect-like Koresh had served the Krath for 400 years. When Krath ships arrived to collect their tribute, the Koresh refused. They had watched humans fight. They had remembered what courage looked like. The Krath crushed the rebellion easily, but they could not crush the idea. Another revolt began on a different world, then another, then a dozen more. Vorak found himself fighting fires across his entire empire, while trying to gather forces for his final assault on humanity. Captain Yunji Song, who had survived the diversionary attack on the Krath homeworld, now led what remained of humanity's offensive fleet. She had learned much in the months of war. She had learned to be patient, to be clever, to strike where the enemy was weak rather than where they were strong. "The Dominion is cracking," she reported to the Emergency War Council on Earth. "Their conquered peoples are rising up. If we push now, push hard, we can break them." President Su Jin-yoon listened carefully. The war had aged her terribly. She had sent thousands of young people to die, written letters to their families, visited hospitals filled with wounded soldiers. But she had not broken, and she would not break now.
"What do you need?"
she asked. "Everything," Yunji replied. "Every ship, every soldier, every weapon we have left. We need to make the Krath choose between fighting us and holding their empire together." Commander Hannah Choi added, "We have also received messages from several conquered species. They are asking for coordination. They want to time their rebellions with our attacks." Sujin felt something stir in her chest. Hope, perhaps, or something like it. "We will give them what they need. Send our tactical data to any species willing to fight. Show them they are not alone." The final campaign lasted 3 months. Human forces struck at key military installations across the Dominion, while resistance movements erupted on world after world. The Krath could not be everywhere. They could not stop everything. High Commander Vorak made his last stand in the Threshold system, where the first rebellion had begun. His fleet was still massive, but his supply lines were cut. His soldiers were exhausted. His empire was crumbling around him. The battle was long and terrible. Ships on both sides died by the dozens. But the humans did not fight alone. Koresh vessels joined them, ancient ships pulled from hiding places and armed with whatever weapons could be found. Ships from other rebellious species appeared as well. Forming a coalition that the galaxy had never seen before, Colonel Sun Wu-Han led a boarding party onto Vorak's flagship. The fighting in the corridors was savage, hand to hand, step by bloody step. Sun Wu was wounded twice but kept going, leading his soldiers deeper into the enemy vessel. They found Vorak on his command bridge, surrounded by his personal guards. The High Commander was massive, nearly 3 meters tall. His body covered in natural armor and scars from countless battles. "You should have stayed on your little world," Vorak growled. "You should have accepted your place." Sun Wu did not respond with words. He attacked. The fight was brutal and fast. Krath guards fell to human weapons. Sun Wu faced Vorak directly, a small human against a giant predator. He was beaten down again and again. His armor cracked. His bones broke. But he kept getting up. In the end, it was not strength that defeated Vorak. It was endurance. The High Commander, who had never faced an enemy that simply refused to die, made a single mistake born of frustration. Sunwa's blade found the gap in his armor. Vorak fell. The Krath Dominion fell with him. 6 months after the war's end, the Galactic Council convened for the first time since the conflict began. The Great Hall was fuller than ever before. Species who had been conquered, species who had watched from the sidelines, species who had hidden in fear all came to witness what would happen next. Earth's new ambassador. Hyun Woo-shin walked to the central platform. He was a quiet man, a scholar before the war, but his voice carried clearly through the massive chamber. "The Krath Dominion is finished," he announced. "Their fleet is destroyed. Their conquered peoples are free. The threat that terrorized this galaxy for millennia is over." Murmurs rippled through the assembly. Many expected what would come next. Humanity would demand territory. They would claim leadership of the Council. They would fill the power vacuum left by the Krath. But Hyunwoo said something different. "We did not fight this war for power. We did not fight for territory or resources or glory. We fought because innocent people were dying and no one else would help. That is all." He looked around the hall, meeting the eyes of beings from 100 different worlds. "Humanity will return to our corner of the galaxy now. We will rebuild our fleet and heal our wounds. We have no interest in ruling anyone. We never did." A Tyranny representative rose. "But surely you expect something in return for your sacrifices?" Hyunwoo considered the question. "We expect only one thing. The next time someone sends a distress signal, the next time innocents cry out for help, we expect this council to answer. We expect you to act, not with words, not with statements of concern, with ships and soldiers and whatever else is needed." His voice hardened slightly. "If you let another species be slaughtered while you debate and delay, you will find us less patient the second time. We would prefer to never fight again, but we will if we must." The council fell silent. Then, slowly, the Valorian representative rose. She was ancient, her crystal body shimmering with colors that had no human names. She had lived for 9,000 years and seen empires rise and fall. She walked to Hyunwoo and spoke in a voice like wind chimes. "In all my years, I have never seen what I saw in this war. A young species, barely born, who heard our cry and came running, who bled and died for strangers, who asked for nothing in return." She took his hands in hers. "The galaxy will not forget. We will not forget." One by one, other species rose to their feet. The Koresh, the Ashuri, dozens of others who had watched or fought or simply hoped. They stood in silence, honoring the humans who had changed everything. Hyun Moon nodded and stepped down from the platform. Humanity's message had been delivered. In the years that followed, the galaxy changed. When distress signals came, ships responded. When innocents were threatened, alliances formed to protect them. The old ways of watching and waiting and accepting cruelty were not forgotten, but they were no longer the only ways. And in the dark corners of space, where predators once hunted freely, a new understanding took root. There were no more easy victims, no more species that could be harvested without consequence, because everyone knew that if you touched the innocent, if you harmed those who could not defend themselves, the humans would find out. And then the humans would come, not for conquest, not for glory, not for power, just because it was the right thing to do, and that, more than any fleet or weapon or empire, was what made them terrifying. That was what made them human.